Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So my name is Ada de Wit, and I'm the curator of works of art and sculpture at the Wallace Collection in London. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Qin Tao, who is senior curator of Chinese collections at National Museums, Scotland. She specializes in Chinese Bronze Age archaeology and numismatics, and has published widely on Chinese material culture and curated permanent displays and temporary exhibitions, such as Chinese oracle bones in 2019 at National Museums, Scotland. So Qin, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Ada, for inviting me. What a delight. And just a quick good afternoon from Edinburgh.
Well, our talk will take about 45 minutes and we will follow this structure. So I'll give you a brief introduction to the collection of Chinese art in the Wallace Collection, and then I will talk specifically about the gold cups of eternal stability. We'll talk about the New Year celebrations at the Qing court, and then Qin will then introduce you to the collection of Chinese art at National Museums of Scotland. And she will present her research on the wonderful crown, which you see here in this slide, decorated with kingfisher feathers. And Qin will also explain this remarkable technique of decorating objects with kingfisher feathers. Right, so I'll begin with the Wallace Collection, which many of you might associate with French 18th century art and with old master paintings. But in fact, we have a very important collection of non-European art, and that also includes a small collection of Chinese objects. And I mean small, it's literally, there are only 38 objects, and they're all collected in the 19th century. Now, among them are a few pieces of Chinese porcelain in French 18th century mounds, and you can see an example here in this slide on your left-hand side. We have several pieces displayed in the Arms and Armor gallery. For instance, the sword, which is here in the middle. We have some great examples of Chinese enamels, including a pair of silver candlesticks with blue enamels. Excuse me. You see one of them in the slide. And also a pair of spectacular Chinese incense burners decorated with cloisonné enamels. And well, from this picture, you can't really get a sense of how big they are, but they're really very big. They're just below 2 meters high, excuse me. But undoubtedly, the most important objects in our Chinese collection is this pair of gold cups of eternal stability. And they're not only the most important Chinese pieces we have, but also they're among the highlights of the entire collection. They're very similar. They differ in small details. You might see in this picture that they have a bit different color. And in fact, very recently, we've done some XRF analysis, and we now know that the cup on your left-hand side, which is a bit darker, it has more silver in alloy, whereas the cup on your right-hand side is more gold, because indeed it has much more gold in the alloy. And I will now describe the cups. So they both have wooden stands, which are inlaid stands, and they include a lovely detail of a bat. And one stand, the one which you see here, is original, whereas the other one, so this one, is probably a 19th century copy. And then each cup rests on 3 elephant heads, and elephants symbolize good luck in Chinese culture. And then each cup has 2 handles in the form of dragons, and that's another auspicious symbol in Chinese art. And then the body of the cup is made of gold, is decorated with pearls and gemstones, and that the blue background, which you see here, that these are kingfisher feathers. The gold decoration is chastened includes some wonderful floral motifs. And then each cup has two inscriptions, and one refers to the official name of the cup, which is the gold cup of eternal stability, but sometimes it's translated as the gold cup of eternal territorial integrity. And then the second inscription refers to the Qianlong Emperor, so basically says that the cup was made during his reign. And inside the cups are gold and plain, they're not decorated. Oh, and just to be clear, so the kingfisher feathers, they come from this a lovely little bird.
Ada, just wondering, I believe this one is a European type of kingfisher bird, right?
Yes, because they're different. They're different types, but just to give an idea.
Yes, certainly, yeah. But you can see that vivid blue from the feather.
Absolutely. And we'll talk more about kingfisher feathers later in this talk. Now, the cups were commissioned by the Qianlong Emperor, and Qianlong had a long reign that spanned most of the 18th century, and he was a great ruler, and he was also a great art connoisseur, wasn't he, Qin?
Oh, yes, certainly. Yeah, while running the enormous Qing Empire as the administrative head, Qianlong was certainly a very dedicated patron of the arts. And he was personally involved in many of the art commissions.
Exactly, and that's definitely the case with the cups. And we know that because the cups are very well documented. They are mentioned, they're described in the records of the imperial workshops that still survive, and we know that the emperor played a very active role in the process of designing them and making them.
Yeah, so I just wondered, how many cups did he commission?
So there were 4 cups. 4 cups were made, and they all still survive. So the Wallace Collection has 2 cups, and you see them on your left-hand side. Then there's 1 cup in the National Palace Museum in Taipei and 1 cup in the Palace Museum in Beijing. And based on these really detailed descriptions in the documents, scholars were able to identify individual cups. So based on the descriptions, we believe that the cup, which is now in the Wallace Collection, the darker cup, the one on your left-hand side, that's the prototype that was commissioned in 1739, and it was delivered in 1740. But the emperor was not fully satisfied with this cup, and he had the design adjusted. And then in the following year, 2 more cups were made. And that's probably the second cup, which is in the Wallace Collection, and the cup which is now in Taipei. Well, the adjustments to the design included adding pearls on top of the dragon handles. And we unfortunately lost the pearls, but at least you can see here there are mounts for the pearls. And then the Taipei cup has the pearls, whereas you see the prototype didn't have any. And then he also asked for the petals of flowers to be rounded. And then many years later, the 4th cup was made, which is now in Beijing. And you can also see that it lost many of the kingfisher feathers. You see much more of the gold background. Now, these 2 cups, the one now in Taipei and Beijing, they were in the Forbidden City. Whereas the 2 cups now in the Wallace Collection were moved at some point, we don't know when, to the old summer palace. The old summer palace was, well, it was the summer residence of the emperor, and it was looted and it was destroyed by the French and by the British during the Second Opium War in 1860. And I think it's also important to realize that it was not a palace in the European sense, so it was not a one big building, but it was a vast area that consisted of lakes and different gardens and different architectural structures. So there are different halls and temples, and that all was destroyed. And what I'm showing you here in this slide is the maquette of the area of the old summer palace that is shown in a museum which was built on the site. I visited it a few years ago, and I mean, what's left there are lakes and there are literally some stones, and only a few structures were rebuilt, including this labyrinth here. And there are various visual sources that show how certain important architectural structures, how they look like, including the set of 20 views of the European pavilions at the Garden of Perfect Clarity. It is possible that the Wallace cups at some point belonged to Colonel Dupin, who was a French military man. He was a very controversial figure already in his lifetime. And we know that he took an active role in looting the old summer palace. I was unable to verify whether these cups were really in his collection, but the original stand of one of our cups has a label that mentions the collection of Colonel Dupin. What we know for sure is that the cups ended up in Paris, and there were acquired by Sir Richard Wallace, one of the founders of our museum, in 1872 at an auction. He bought them. We know exactly how much he paid. And then eventually, after his death, the collection was inherited by his wife, Lady Wallace, and she was the one who gave it to the British nation in 1897. But I would like to go back to the original context, and explain why the cups were commissioned by the Qianlong Emperor in the first place. Well, he commissioned the cups especially for the first stroke ceremony, which was held at midnight at the beginning of the new lunar year in the Forbidden City, which you see here in this picture. And it was held in the Hall of Mental Cultivation, which is number 11 here in this map, in the Eastern Warmth Chamber. The Hall of Mental Cultivation is closed now to the public. It's being renovated. I'm not really sure when it will be reopened. And the ceremony consisted of a few parts. So at the beginning of the ceremony, the emperor took the gold cup of eternal stability and he drank tusu wine from it, a special drink. And that was to ensure the territorial integrity of the country. He then lit the very special jade candlestick of constant harmony, and that was to besiege the favorable weather for the country. And then he wrote auspicious phrases, first with red ink, then with black ink, and then the phrases were sealed and they were never meant to be open again. And at the end of the ceremony, he opened an almanac to pray for prosperity. And sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry to interrupt there. Yeah, I believe there's also a dedicated calligraphy brush for the emperor, right?
Oh, that's true. There was a special brush. It had a special name, which I now forgotten. Do you remember the name of the?
Yes. I mean the brush, and also it has its cap. It has the inscription of 万年青 and 万年之. So both have the very auspicious meaning of blooming for 10,000 years.
Oh yes, that's true. And the brush exists. It's still in the Palace Museum in Beijing.
Yes, yeah. I think this all together with the jade candlestick and also the gold cup is for that longevity of the empire.
Yes, because of course the materials, they also have they're symbolic. It's not just the form, but also the fact that the gold and jade were used.
Yes, they're very carefully selected. Yeah, and And also, for example, jade has its very long history of use and its appreciation in China from at least the Neolithic and also till the present day. And there's also a very known idiom in China that is there's a price for gold and silver, but jade is always priceless.
I see. And the Tushu wine, because that's something that really interests me. It was a type of herbal wine, wasn't it? And I was curious if you could tell us a bit more about it. And I'm also wondering whether you've ever tried it and whether it's still being used.
Yeah, unfortunately, I never had the opportunity. I believe it's a tradition at some point, just lost in history. But I have read that there's a recent revival of that, of this tradition. So there were, so there are Tushu wine being produced using the traditional recipe, which are available from the historical books. And I also just want to say that actually when we mean wine, it actually does not mean like wine normally made from grapes, but actually it's a herbal infused liquor. Yeah, so the base is this very strong grain based alcohol.
Oh, yes. And also my understanding is that the tradition of drinking Tushu wine at the New Year is a very old tradition, and it's much older than the first stroke ceremony.
Yes, certainly. There have been a number of very well-known poems from various dynasties mention about the Tushu wine. And yeah, so the ceremony actually was was established actually by the Yongzheng Emperor.
The first stroke ceremony.
Yes. Yeah, so Yongzheng is father of the Qianlong Emperor, but very much actively promoted by the Qianlong Emperor.
Oh yes, and then the tradition continued, at least that was still used by Qianlong's successor, because I know that he described it, that's like one of the most important sources of information about the first stroke ceremony.
Yes, yeah, there was a really good document from the Qianlong's son, the Qing Emperor. But from what the current understanding is, it's continued at last, continued for a few generations to at least the great-grandson of Qianlong, the Xianfeng Emperor. But then there was no records on the ceremony afterwards. So it's possible they continue, but just it has not been documented. And it's also possible that it was a time the country has its external and internal troubles, and such a ceremony just gradually faded out.
Yes, I understand. And I just wanted to also comment on the picture I'm actually showing, because I forgot to do it before. This is a reconstruction of the emperor's desk, and you see the objects used during the first stroke ceremony. And I took it in Beijing a few years ago, I think in 2018, when the Palace Museum organized a wonderful exhibition on the Chinese New Year. So, and that also includes the jade, not only the cup that is in Beijing, but also the jade candlestick. And on your right-hand side, there's the second version of the jade candlestick that is in Taipei. And there are also various paintings related to the New Year that depict the emperor and his family. And importantly for us, importantly for me, they also depict the cup, the gold cup of eternal stability, and the jade candlestick. And here I'm showing you one example. And I'm sorry for the quality of the image, but this scene, which you see on your right-hand side, is here in this painting. And here you see a person, possibly Qianlong Emperor's son, who holds the cup and the jade candlestick. And the quality isn't great, but like, believe me, it's just very, very accurate depiction of the cup. And the cup was very much a symbol of political stability. And it is also interpreted that the fact that the paintings show the emperor's family and his sons, and the fact that one of them brings the cup and the candlestick, that also is the symbol of political stability, continuity of the family. There are more examples of such paintings. Here I'm just showing you a detail of another one, which is also in the Palace Museum, Beijing. And you see not only that the depiction of the cup is very accurate, but also the stand, which for me was also a very important piece of information, because at some point, the beginning of our research, not everyone was sure whether the actual stand is that accurate and original, but you see even that all these details are still the same. And here I'm showing you another painting, which is in Taipei. And that shows the family, 3 generations of the family. And then 2 people here are bringing something that looks very much as the gold cup of eternal stability and the jade candlestick. But there are much more simplified images. And I think it's not entirely clear who is depicted, but I think, Eugene, you have a theory who that might be.
Well, yeah, there have been multiple interpretation of this painting, and is who were depicted. Is this a family? Clearly it's a family gathering of someone of high status, and then does that because of the gold cup and also jade candlestick are featured. That means that such ceremony, such the use are also expanded to other elite family, not just the emperor. However, so my understanding is, I think, and I'll judge from other sources, especially this painting was actually painted by a court painter who would be done commission work from the emperor and his immediate family. And while this is obviously a depiction of the joyful celebration, but considering the significance of the jade candlestick and also the golden cup, all closely related to the longevity of the Qing state, the Qing Empire. I doubt this would be in a very hierarchy society. Such use of such very exclusive special cup would be allowed for other nobles. But from other sources, we know that only 4 cups were made, and they are exclusively for the emperor, not even the crown prince. While the crown prince might bring the cup, but it was the emperor who would drink the wine. And
exactly. And I think these paintings also show various elements of the New Year celebrations that you might still recognize today. There's certain elements that really continue. And I'm just, sorry.
Oh, yes, very much so. Yeah, while obviously tradition does evolve, and so as celebration customers, and also so for nowadays there's always this, as depicted in the painting, there's a family gathering time with good food and drink.
Yes, and is it still? I mean, because I read about this different traditions at the Qing court. So, for instance, that people wore new clothes at the New Year. They had, of course, images of home guardians and auspicious characters on their doors. And my understanding is that that's also that continues as well.
Yes, very much continued. Yeah, I certainly remember when I grew up. Yeah, I always get new clothes for the new year. A very exciting time for kids.
All right. Yes, and I think also making offerings to the ancestors, right? And
yes. yeah, family gathering is really important. It's not just the living one, but also the deceased and the immediate family. For that, offering of food, also wish for their blessing of the family.
And could you also explain to us, because the various terms are being used, there's of course the Lunar New Year, there's Chinese New Year, there's the Spring Festival, but that all refers to the same festival. Could you clarify the differences between the terms?
Exactly, they are the same terms, but it's I think it's one is for example, Chinese New Year is widely used in the English-speaking world. This is very much closely associated, but actually we know that the Lunar New Year is widely celebrated in East Asia and Southeast Asia, and so in Chinese. In Chinese terms, there are actually various terms we would use for refer to the New Year. So that's why there's various translation as well. And some term would be used in more formal occasions. When, for example, when you write the couplet, when you write a poem about the New Year, and some would be used, say, by the government for some notice or announcement, and some would be used in the dialect when you greet your friends and family. So there are various terms and using different period, and some of them coexist, and some still continue today. And but it is in general, it is the end of the lunar year, and also it is the start of the spring, because the Chinese lunar calendar is very much tied with the season and the agricultural work.
Yes, that's definitely true. Right. I'm also very curious about your museum collection, and do you have any objects used in the celebration of the New Year?
Oh, very good question. Yes. Our collection has a very diverse categories and types, and we do not have anything that's particularly directed, like, for example, the gold cup exclusive for the New Year ceremony. But we have, for example, the Ansys Portrait, which featured very prominently in the New Year celebration. And we have various objects depicted in calendric animals. For example, for this year, the year tiger, you will find a number of tiger motif or objects in our galleries.
So tigers here? No, I don't see any tigers.
Yeah. So what we showed you in the last slide is our relatively new East Asia gallery, opened in 2019, actually also in the Chinese New Year period. And add that next slide, please. And then so I just will briefly mention about our Chinese collection. So the collection was numbered about 11,000, and it was collected during the last 150 years since the foundation of the museum in 1850s, and encompass the main category of Chinese material culture, from the ceramics, bronzes, textile, painting, carved lacquer, jade, and ivory. And then we also continued to collect the contemporary work. As you can see here, there's a quite well-known Mao poster from the Cultural Revolution era. And yes, so this is, and also there's quite, there's a contemporary artwork of a scholar stone, but in the form of, but in the material of metal. So this is very much, we'll continue building our Chinese collection.
Let's see. Well, one of the reasons I invited you to this talk is your research on a spectacular crown decorated with kingfisher feathers, which you also published in Orientations in the magazine that was in March, April 2019. And I'm just wondering, would you consider the crown one of the highlights of your collection?
Yes, certainly. Yes, certainly is. It's very much a known piece actually for our audiences in Edinburgh. It was displayed in another gallery before the new gallery opened in 2019, and a well-known piece for its elaborate decoration of kingfisher feather and its visual strikeness. So when I started in the National Museum of Scotland in 2017, it's one of the objects that caught my attention, and then was selected for the gallery after a visual examination of the object, and which at the time was interpreted as the opera costume part of the headdress.
Mm-hmm.
And but during that examination, I noticed that there are many Chinese characters, and also the delicacy and the exquisiteness of this headdress, which put doubt on the interpretation of the time that is for opera performance. And then, so that started my research on the object. Next slide, please.
Okay.
Yes. So as you can see, actually, we have a historical photograph from an opera performer from Beijing at the early 1900s here, and it's just even this immediately comparison, you will see it's very different. While of course the opera performer would have a different slide of headdresses, depends on the role and depends on which type of opera they are performing. But one thing very clear is the gear they would have for performance is always striking and extravagant. It has that, it allows audiences to view and see them from a distance when audience will sit with that distance of the performer on a platform. But our kingfisher phoenix crown on the left, as you can see, it's very delicate. Yeah, it has this very lively dragon in the middle, but you really need to see with closely. It would not be possible if it's with distance. And also have two lovely protruding pheasants that's coming out of the two sides. Oh, Ada, could you please move to the next slide so we can see some of the good details?
Oh, yes.
Yes. So as you can see from here on the left and the middle images, there's some very good details of the kingfisher headdress. And as mentioned, there are many Chinese characters, which I will come back later. But you can see just from this character here, Tian, which means heaven or sky. It's actually formed by two different colors of the kingfisher feathers. And they are very carefully arranged to first forming the character with good strokes, and then also being set on this slightly darker background in order for the character to come out, to be obvious. But again, this needs to be closely looked at to realize actually that's a character Tian, rather than view from distance. And then for the picture in the middle, where the dragon come out, which is chasing a flaming pearl or flaming ball, and as you can see, even that the depiction use a different color to forming the pattern, which will give you a view shyness. And then on the right, it's a type of kingfisher lived in mud in many parts of the Asia. So this particular one was taken in India, but this is a type of white-breasted kingfisher, which has been historically documented as a quite a desirable type of kingfisher bird because of its very vivid blue feather. And
And so just to interpret, you show like different colors. Do they come from different species of kingfisher feathers? Sorry, kingfishers, or do they also like come from different parts of the bird's body?
Yeah, so it's actually yes for both. Yeah, so there has been some research done on some of the kingfisher decorated items which have feather from different species. I think that's very intentional because of they would have the diverse colors of feather, different texture, and as to make the visual attractiveness, and then also they would use actually different parts of the feather. As you can see on this photo, the back of the bird actually looks much softer and also delicate. It actually have a brighter blue actually compared to the wing, which is just underneath, and then also the tail. And so there's actually in the kingfisher feather industry, it's actually kind of been categorized, known that there are two types. One is the soft blue, which is the brighter, delicate back feather, which is very hard to apply. And then you also have the harder blue, known as, which is from the wing and then the tail. Which is slightly less bright, but darker, but it will bring out the contrast when being formed together with the soft blue.
I see. So I understand that because of all these details in the crown, you don't think it belonged to an opera singer. So who would have owned the crown?
Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so let's have a look to the Chinese character I mentioned. Yeah, so here I used some circles just to highlight the character on the headdress. There's actually a good number of characters. So started from the top in the middle, which have the character reading from the top to bottom with the two character, which is Shen Zhi, which means imperial decree. And then we also have four characters surrounding those two one, but this one is reading from right to left. So one character is missing, which is the highlighted the yellow one, the thicker circle, which is the character missing. But because of the phrase is quite known, so I could confidently reconstruct it, which is the word guan, meaning official. So the character, these four character of the phrase would be guan gao zhong feng, meaning officially publicizing the significant owner. So this immediately puts a puzzle. What owner are we talking about it? Then if we look around the dragon, there are four further characters which are circled in orange. Again, we read it from right to left. Is the Feng Tian Gao Ming, meaning by the mandate of having, announcing the appointment. And with all this, and there are two further more characters, which is actually two protruding out away from the orange, the characters circled by the orange. Is one on the right is the character Ri, meaning the sun, and then the character Yue on the left, meaning the moon. So with all this character together, it does pose this is very unlikely belong to opera singer for such dedicated, exquisite work. This would have been done probably by a team of highly skilled artisans, but someone with with the highest skill on such technique. Next slide, please, Ada. So as we know, as I mentioned, the phrases are actually quite known. They have been found in other artifacts. So what I illustrated here is another phoenix crown from Nanjing Museum. It was excavated in 1972 from the family cemetery of Li Wei. And then Li Wei was quite well documented as he lived in the 17th century and was a very high-ranking officer in the Qing government. Actually, he was honored by the emperor for the first rank. So this came from his family cemetery, and it's very much likely this crown, very elaborate, belonged to his wife. And we knew from the historical records that she was herself was awarded the first owner lady because of her husband's achievements. And then, more importantly, it has this 4 characters that are exact the same on our kingfisher headdress, which I circled in yellow here, is Feng Tian Gao Ming. And so you might wonder is how, except what other connection may have, because it's a slightly different crown. So another thing to point out is this crown would originally have been covered with kingfisher feather and also some of the gemstone. As you can see, there's an empty mount in the middle. Yeah, it's only because the crown was buried in a tomb for like 400 years. So due to its organic nature, so no kingfisher feather survived.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Right. And then, so would the crown like that have been worn like during New Year celebrations? What would be the occasion?
Yeah, I would very much think so. So I believe when ladies receive such honorable appointment, it's very much such an honor system. It's very much like the New Year honor list in the UK. And they would have such crown commissioned for such moments. And then they would be worn such headdress for other key festivals, and also important occasions, some ceremony, going to see some of the say, you know, for example, for the honorable lady to go visit the queen as part of the court duties. And so it would be very much used not just one time at the time of appointment. And as we know, the New Year is such an important festival, and it is potentially they would have been worn.
I see. And there's another slide showing the headdress.
Yeah, so this is a hand painting of a lady from in the collection of the British Museum. So this one is depicting, so this is a portrait, we call it the Ansys Portrait, which is the depiction of a deceased relative, which would be commissioned by the family. And this portrait would be worshipped by the family, particularly during the Chinese New Year period. So in this depiction, the lady was dressed very formally, and she obviously, from what she was wearing, and especially this Mandarin square in on the front part of her robe, is she has honorable rank. And then what we can read from the this badge is actually a Mandarin duck, which in the Qing official system, this would be equivalent to the 7th rank.
What does it mean, the 7th rank?
Yeah, the 7th rank is about like the mayor for a city or town. Yeah, and so it's in the province, but if you served in the capital, you would have that level. Yeah, we can see it as a pay scale nowadays.
I see, yeah.
Yeah, and the more important related to us is this honorable lady. She's wearing a phoenix crown. And this crown was clearly, as we can see from the image on the right, is clearly decorated with kingfisher feathers.
I see. So you suggest that they crown you have in your museum might have belonged to an honorable lady, but do you also know the provenance of your crown?
Yes, so that is one of the interpretation I put forward. So there is another potential. It depends on the exact date of the kingfisher headdress. It could also belong to a bride, but that is not a conclusive interpretation. Which is as the fashion of using kingfisher feather decorated jewelry spread from the court and to the nobles and also to the people who ever can afford them. Yes, regarding the provenance of our piece, it's a donation to the museum in the 1960s from a Helen Mackenzie Westwater, who served as a nurse during the World War I. Yeah, and so our provenance research is very much likely that she actually inherited this from her family, as her parents and half-sister were both in China in the early 20th century.
Yes. Right, I mean, this has been, of course, your research on the crown, but I also know that in the process of investigating the object, you learned a lot about the kingfisher feathers. So could you also, I mean, we already mentioned a few facts about the feathers, but maybe you could share a bit more of your findings with us.
Yes, I think we can move to the next slide. Yeah, to see, yeah, and yes, the technique of the applying kingfisher feather to a surface is actually has a particular term in Chinese, which is 点缀, means dotting the feather onto surfaces. So this involves a very carefully arrangement and then apply the feathers. So the feather would be, there would of course first with the design, and then the feather depends on its dark blue or light blue or what types of the feather, the color shades of the feather, they would be cut into particular lengths and then being very painstakingly and carefully arranged, and then they were glued onto a surface. So for your cup, obviously this would be glued onto the gold surface, and for ours it's the paper support. So it's a metal wire with a paper support. And then we know that from some of the other research carried out, it's a protein-based glue they would have been used.
And different types of objects were decorated.
Oh yes, yeah. The use of the kingfisher feather are quite wide. It's not just on this very exquisite golden cup reserved for the emperor or headdress like a jewelry, but other items as well.
And we have a few examples.
Yes. So yeah, this is a helmet, a ceremonial armor helmet from the Metropolitan Museum in New York in their collection. So this one you can see very clearly that the feather would have been decorated with kingfisher feathers and formed very lovely dragon-like creatures, and also with characters as well.
Yes, and then a few other objects. There's some.
Yeah, so
animals.
Yeah, a good number. Yeah, we have a screen here on the left, and then in the middle is a framed picture, and then even the snuff bottles, such like a very personal item, yeah, would be decorated with kingfisher feather. Yeah, one thing I particularly like this framed picture in the middle, which is again in the British Museum collection, is the apply onto the surface using different techniques. So we have this very auspicious branch coming out that's using kingfisher feather to highlight its very attractively blue. But then we also have the gold, which is using the Cozone enamel techniques. it's this mixture of applied technique onto the surface to used together, and which is also showcasing is the dian cui, the dotting the surface with blue feather is very highly valued. And and then so is the kingfisher feather as a decorative material.
Yes, and I think it's also very important to mention that the kingfisher feathers, and I think that's quite confusing for many people, but they're not actually blue because the feathers don't contain blue pigment, and the color is in fact structural. It's created by the structural arrangement of a transparent material on which light shines and it's reflected in a very specific way. And I think it's just almost difficult to imagine that those feathers are not really blue because they don't have the pigment. If you see an individual feather, it's like kind of grayish, brownish. I think we need to start wrapping up because we would like to ask, to make sure that people can ask us questions. But I do have one more question to you, Qin, which is, were the birds killed in the process of obtaining the feathers?
From what I gathered from literary sources, I believe so. Yeah. So the kingfisher birds are very delicate, and to take the feather or even just carefully cut would scare them. And also, because of the large volume needed for kingfisher, for decoration, for this industry to sustain. So for such a commercial operation, I think the bird's life was probably the least consideration. And so I believe that thousands of kingfishers would have died for sustain the industry in the past.
But I mean, the technique is, I mean, maybe not the technique, but the use of kingfisher feathers, like new kingfisher feathers, is banned. That's my understanding.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, so the majority of the types of kingfisher birds in China are in the protection list. Mm-hmm. So it would be illegal to use them. But I believe I have read that there are a small, very sustainable use of the feather being preserved because of this highly skilled technique. And then there actually have been modern ways of further allowing this dotting the surface with feather, but not necessarily using kingfisher bird feather, because but actually say use goose feather, which would be chemically dyed into blue, and to allow that the technique and the skills to continue.
Right. I think we have to finish here because we need to make sure that our audience, they can ask us questions. But Qin, I would like to thank you so much. I mean, it's such a pleasure to talk with you about your research, about Chinese art, kingfisher feathers. I could continue for hours, but let's finish here. These are the two objects we discussed, we focused on, and thank you very much.